Welcome everyone. We are super excited to be celebrating 10,000 members in this group. We were looking at the numbers, getting higher and higher every day. There's more people that come in, which is really, really cool. It's a testament to, I think, this process. It's a testament to a lot of the joy being created around the world. We are super excited to be able to, share with everyone an event like this, because every single day we see such activity on our group, helping one another, sharing in successes, troubleshooting things that are hard. So Penny, Hillary, and I are just really excited to be able to host Greg Hanley today. Thank you to Eric Jacobson for the Zoom hookup for a meeting of this size. And I don't know, Hillary, is there anything else before we get moving on to the next one? Do you want to say anything?
I just want to say that I'm really happy to be a part of this community, and we are only as great as all of you are. So thank you for being here with us, and a huge thank you for Dr. Hanley for agreeing to do this celebration with us. This is a huge moment for us as a group, and we're just super excited. Penny, is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, I really want to say thanks to the awesome admin and mod team. I think you guys are really awesome. I really also want to thank Eric and Dr. Hanley for being here today. But mostly, I just really want to say I think all of you guys are awesome.
Thanks, Penny. Okay, so the agenda for the celebration today is going to be, first, we're going to be recognizing some of the awesome people that are in behind the scenes that make this group work every day. Most people don't get to see how much activity is going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of moderating, basically. That's really the idea, right? There's making sure that the community standards are being upheld, and there's also just new ideas coming in. So the chat behind the scenes is really one of the biggest things for our group, and I think that keeps our group healthy. So let's see. I'm gonna first move this out of the way so I can see all the names. First, we're going to recognize current moderators, just because they do such awesome work. Everyone is assigned days during the week to be on the board and be active, and you see their names all the time. And to be honest, they might be assigned certain days, but most of them are still active every day anyway. So it's a really, really cool part of the experience. So one issue I'm having, though, I can't see the top part of it because my screen share. So if I can't see it, Hillary, can you help me out? So I'm going to start. Okay, thank you. I'm going to start off in this little circle here of the moderators. I'm going to start with Emily and Bethany, Lee, Shruti, Logan, Taylor, Ed W, or Ed S, Megan, Nathan, Jeremy, Lisa, Kaylin, Ed L, the third Ed in this group, Felice, Alicia, and I can't see the top two ones.
Jessica and Karen, and we want to give a special shout out to Karen at Potential Inc. for having an amazing watch party. So thanks guys for getting together for such an amazing celebration. We're happy to have all of you on screen.
Nice job, Karen. Thank you. So these are the people that are currently, getting this stuff done basically every single day. We also wanted to do a shout out to first the past admin, the people who formed the group. So Kirsty and Michelle, I don't think that when they first started this group, they could ever imagine that it would be 10,000 people. When I first joined this group, I didn't think it could be 10,000 people, and they were there from ground zero. So a big round of applause to them, because without them starting this, who knows if there would ever be a community like this. So thank you very much. And then next, the other shout out is going to be to former moderators, Shane and Karen. They both were a huge presence in the early stages of our moderating, and they are always welcome back whenever they can do so, because we miss having them on the team. Anything else from you guys, Hillary or Penny? Is that good? Good. All right. So the next order of business is going to be the group logo reveal. So to celebrate 10,000 members, we have a new logo. A lot of time went into this. We're bouncing different ideas back and forth with the moderators. Hillary is very picky and sends everything back to the drawing board a million times. So thank you for that, Hillary. But I think that we came up with a really, really good logo. And drum roll, please, without further ado. Oh wait, no, that's not the right one. Hold on a second. That's the wrong one. Let's see. There it is. That's it. So that's the new logo for our group. We still have the same cover page on our group with the different people, jumping and, holding hands and all that stuff, because we think that that also tells a story. But as far as a logo, we thought that this was, a fitting tribute to the group. Anything,
Thanks
Hillary?
for all the great feedback, everyone. Ed is right. I was probably the most picky one of us when we were designing this. So also thank you to Ed and Penny and all the moderators for being so patient with me as I was very picky. Doing.
This one still might go back to the drawing board after this. She might still want to change it, but it's now it's locked in history. So this is staying as it is.
Yes.
Maybe you can at one point publish the millions of versions that have gone by in the past.
Yes.
Don't do that.
And another shout out to the cabs are here graphic that Hillary made. That was just a joke. It wasn't really going to be the logo, but we just wanted to throw a nod to that awesome graphic contest, the meme contest that we had. That first one was still the best one.
We always have to have those jokes. That's part of our community, right? That's part of why our community is the way it is, and why we love Ed as an admin, because he brings all the humor to the group, and we love it.
Well, thank you. So, all right, you ready to get this started?
We are. Let's get started with some questions. All righty. So just to reiterate, Penny and I are going to be going back and forth, talking with Dr. Hanley here, asking some questions that we collected from the group. We have about 16 questions to go through. And we are just going to ask that you keep your microphones off, and you can use the chat if you have follow-ups that you want to ask, and we'll see if we have time to ask them. If not, we're going to do a follow-up Q&A with the admins and the moderators after this for any questions that didn't get answered today. So without further ado, thank you again, Dr. Hanley, for joining us. And I'm going to get us started with the first question. So our first question for you is, would you be open, or can you tell us about some of the current happenings at FTF? What's new? What can we expect to see in the near future and the far future? What's coming up?
Yeah, oh, that's great. Thanks, Hillary, for the chance to do that. That's a great way to start. But if I could, just for 1 minute, I just want to go backwards and just to express my gratitude, I guess is the best word, for this group, and for, Kirsty and Michelle. Please know the history of this was, there was a workshop in the UK, and it was so engaging. The people at this workshop were really so reinforcing to work with. And I felt so good at the end of the second day, and then felt crushingly bad when I knew lecture and interactive lecture was only going to take people so far. You know what I mean? And people were saying, well, how can we get support to do these things? And I was clueless, because I was still a full-time professor, and we didn't have a system of support. And I don't think it was my idea, but at the break, we had a discussion and said, we should do a Facebook group. And by we, I mean, can someone please volunteer to do that? Because I don't know what that means. And Kirsty and Michelle volunteered to do that. And again, it was a way to get the people from that workshop, a way to have a buddy to support each other doing this process. And in that spirit is still captured in the 10,000 member group. That's the point of the group, is to find a buddy to help you do this process and answer questions, especially for those BCBAs on an island and trying something new in their practice. So again, I can't tell you how impressed I am as to the fact that it got started so well, the fact that it is what it is today, and how much work you as moderators put into it. I know it's tremendous, and I don't know the details. I just know it's a tremendous amount of work, and I'm very grateful for you doing that as well. Please know, I'm going to tell you about FTF right now. And FTF is a company that came out of providing support for practical functional assessment, skill-based treatment, and a few other behavioral assessment treatment processes. And despite having this company, the mission of the company is to disseminate these value-first ABA processes. And that's what this group does. What this group does is the same thing I'm trying to do with the company. And the fact that we have this multi-pronged approach is probably the only reason we're hitting dissemination marks that we are. So again, I can't tell you how happy I am that this group exists. And there's a couple questions in here about, oh, we provide consultation. Is this a problem given FTF's mission? and all that kind of stuff? And the answer to me is no, because my mission is that this stuff, the right stuff, gets disseminated. And I believe this group disseminates the right stuff. And so I 100% support it. If you don't know that, please know that. Okay, as far as FTF stuff going on, what's new is what's old. We're just constantly having discussions about how we can disseminate value-based ABA, for lack of a better term, to as many people as possible. Because like we were a couple of years ago, we're worried about the face and the image of ABA, and that image has meaning because it'll impact whether families get ABA services in the future, given legislation and guild issues and all that. So it's all about just disseminating the kind of ABA that has a long shelf life, we hope. But as far as specifics, I'll give you a couple of specifics. I guess these are almost like announcements, and they put us, I guess, put a little fire under us to make sure we follow through in a timely manner. Number one, we're developing with Dr. Camilleri and Dr. Rupel, we're developing a 16-hour course for RBTs. This is not a 40-hour RBT course. That people are already doing that, and they're doing that really well, by and large. And so this is like after you did your 40 hours and you're an RBT and you're savvy now you want to make a difference, and you want to be a great supervisee to a BCBA who wants to do these processes, and you want to know how to bring the joy, and you want to know how to turn off problem behavior before it begins, and you want to know how to prompt and shape and differentiate, reinforce, and extend it out and problem solve. That's what this course is going to be about, and we're really psyched to get that going. So that's a massive priority. Another one is developing a course on what we call universal protocols, and some people know what those things are, but they're just an attempt to make sure all clients in an organization get some aspect of this process that we care about. And what I mean by the aspect is they get the joy brought, if you will, through a universal protocol. But the main intention of the universal protocol is to keep escalated behavior at bay, to decrease the odds to hopefully zero of any physical management. These are goals. There are no guarantees, as we all know with these things, but it's just a baseline process for when someone new comes into an organization. How do you treat them? How does a new staff member interact? How does a staff member that gets transferred to a client they've never worked with, how do they interact with them to make sure it's a great day? That's the point of universal protocol. So we're developing a course for that. And we're finally developing a sleep course. Dr. Mashid Gayamagami is going to do the sleep course and try to get that. There's a lot of nice free videos floating around, but we want to get a dedicated teaching platform for that. We're working a lot with internationalizing materials. We have so many great partners out there, largely because of this group, and they're translating all this stuff, and we're working with folks to translate the courses so we can again fulfill this international journalization dissemination mission. Then I got to give a shout out to Penny Holloway. If you don't know this, Penny has really bright ideas, right? She has these bright ideas. In some ways, they matriculate through meetings that we have at FTF. And I'm like, where'd that come from? And people are like, oh, Penny said we should do this. And I'm like, well, Penny's right again. So this is one of those Penny's right again moments. And we're working on article reviews. There'll all be one CEU, and they're all hosted by a lovely colleague and employee at FTF called Catherine, her name is Catherine Jessel. And she is going to be the host of these things. She interviews the author of each article for about 10 minutes and kind of gets a little background, some details that aren't in publications. And then we have what we call an appreciator, a non-author who reads the article, creates PowerPoint, and teaches the fundamental aspects of the article, the take-home points that matter really to practitioners. So it's not all the points of the article. It might not even be the points that the author intended. It's what are the technological and value-based points that can help you be a more effective behavior analyst that are maybe buried in the article. And like Hillary and I talk about, we want to make sure people don't lose touch with journals, even though as a guy still attempting to publish research and getting a little frustrated with process every now and then, I still believe in the process. I still believe there are gems in the process, and I hope behavior analysts that are part of this group, get information from multiple sources, including peer-reviewed journals, right? And this is our way to maybe bridge the gap a little bit. And so we're really excited about that. let's see, what else are we doing? We're working with a lot of little companies and some larger companies to bring things to scale. It's called Train the Trainer. You know, when people bring kids to a finish line or some sort of meaningful outcome, how can they develop the confidence to scale up and train their own? Potential is a good example. The group having the watch party right now, they've invested in Train the Trainer. And I think they'll be the first to tell you if you ever get a chance to talk to Karen, one of the leaders there. And obviously, Dr. Jacobson has been leading this at UCP for even longer. If you talk to either one of them, you'll learn that it is hard to scale this up in organizations. You clearly need a leader. You clearly need multiple voices that have been effective with this process. And sometimes you need support, and it's hard work because it's kind of like cultural shift, as Dr. Jacobson has taught us, and cultural shift and changing beliefs is hard. And so we're supporting a lot of teams with that going forward. And then the last thing I want to mention is this thing called the BHI. The BHI is the Behavioral Health Index. We've been using it for years. It was called the Freedom Index, the freedom from the risk of severe problem behavior, but it's been modified largely through the help of ACORN, Behavioral Health. And we use it now to track outcomes. It's kind of a global measurement system of risk or protective factors for severe problem behavior. We just finished initial evaluation showing it's reliable and sensitive. We're going to hope to publish those soon. But it's a big part of what we do right now is try to get different measures of the effects of what we're all talking about right here. And it's not just rate of problem behavior and step, what step we're at in skill-based treatment. It's about number of restraints. It's about number of injuries to staff or client. And it's the things that the Behavioral Health Index can track on a quarterly basis. So you can see, and administrators can see, it has a lot of face validity. You know what I mean? When you see movement, when you see a whole program's curve shift towards protective factors, I think that'll have more importance for a program administrator trying to support you doing your one-to-one work than graphs about your one-to-one work. So anyways, the BHI is something we're excited about, and we'll be doing some presentations on that going forward. So Hillary, thanks for the chance to share those things. Maybe there's other things. Sorry, Tony, Mashid, or Kelsey, if I missed some things, but those are the biggies.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. We're all very excited about all the beautiful events to come. And yeah, we're looking forward to seeing all of those. So we're going to go on to the next question. The next question is, I loved the expediting the process webinar. Are there any new global recommendations you are making in more recent updates, things that you all learned at FTF that you can share? In other words, part two.
Yeah, again, it's a great opportunity to talk about these things. So I have to preface it with this though, Penny. Everything I'm about to say has not been empirically validated, transition through the peer review process. And I want to make it clear, it doesn't make it any less believable to me, because you have to believe in something other than what we've shown functional control over, obviously. And so these things are also future research opportunities, know that. And that's kind of how this stuff works. But these are the things that I think are, very important going forward. The first one is we're really focused on working with people to develop IEP-like objectives while kids are in reinforcement. That's something we've done a terrible job at in the past. The objectives while the child's in the establishing operation write themselves. Communication, toleration, cooperation, all the branches, academics, leisure, the objectives are so easy, right, to pull out of that. By contrast, a lot of times people are worried about the process because the child's in reinforcement for so long during the day, and it seems like a waste of time. And we can say, well, it's not a waste of time because we're developing a relationship and, that sort of thing, but that doesn't fly with most people. And so I think we're working very hard on figuring out what are the kind of things we can target during the reinforcement interval. And it requires that we be a little more comfortable with objectives that don't involve direct instruction. It's almost like naturalistic teaching, but even lighter than that, because we don't want people just popping EOs into kids' reinforcement intervals. That really is antithetical to the process. But there are things we can focus on and we can measure and we can see if they're developing towards our objectives. And those are things like play skills, leisure skills, functional engagement. There are things like joint initiation, joint attention. There are some things that you know, if you've done this process and you hung out with the same child in reinforcement for 20 or so therapy hours, they are behaving differently and often much more effective at the end of 20 hours in reinforcement than they were in the beginning. And we didn't do anything direct other than be available, kind of zip it and get out of their way and be responsive to them. Really follow their lead and be responsive. That's called differential reinforcement in the absence of prompting. And thus it makes us uncomfortable because we're not managing and programming it as much. But it doesn't mean we can't write those objectives for MANs, the emergence of MANs, and track just a simple tracking of each novel MAN uttered across the 20 hours, 30 hours of therapy during reinforcement. Okay, these are things, again, we can write in as objectives. They're not as easy to achieve as things we directly instruct. They're not as easy to achieve as things we produce through naturalistic teaching, but they're no less important, and they require patience, and they also require the chutzpah, even though that's not my culture, I still like the word. It requires the chutzpah to go to an IEP meeting with failure data. Say, yeah, we focused on engagement and joint attention and MANs, and we got 1 out of 3. In 3 months, we got 1 out of 3. Because that's what you have to suffer through when you're not directly teaching it, when they're objectives. So again, it's these kind of conversations that we're having and trying to figure out how to put into a research questions. Let's see. Let's talk about responding to problem behavior. Okay, that is the heart and soul of what we're expected to teach people, is it not? We can talk about skill-based treatment till blue in the face, but all people want to know is, but what do I do when he does this? What do I do when he grunts? What do I do when he hits? What do I do when he hits himself? And they want specifics. And you may notice even in the 10-hour course, I gave short shrift to it. I had 1 slide, 2 bullets, very tidy, as though it was that easy. So let's just talk through this a little bit. This is an update, and this does not have empirical verification, although it has empirical support to some extent, and I'll mention a couple articles in a moment. But the deal is this. The first take-home point is this. If you can give a few-word answer to the question, how do I respond to X? To me, it's already wrong. That's the first thing I've learned, that how we respond to problem behavior can't be summarized in a process term like extinction. It can't be summarized in a process term like prompt, redirect. Those are all too barren. They lack a certain humanism. They lack some televisability, and that's the stuff around the edges that might be more important than the central point about the contingency management. And so if it's possible, can I share my screen? Is that allowed, or is that breaking some rules? Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Ready? Here's what I want you to do, folks. I want you to think about this. Kids, you have a client in the process. Let's say they have language. They're at CAB 5. They're pretty, through chaining. They had 2 perfect days in a row. And then on the 3rd day, they engaged in severe behavior, an episode of severe behavior. And I want you to think, what immediately should you do? What is your response? And I'm not going to give you any more context because I think we can get on the same page without additional context. Okay, so I want you to think about that. And then I'm going to throw up a slide. And this is what I think we should do, despite the amazing lack of direct evidence for this particular tactic. Okay, just pull it up. Here we go. Okay, so I hope you have your answer locked and loaded. Okay, push that over there. I can't see faces anymore. That's a little sad. Pardon me, 1 minute. Okay, there's a few faces. Can you see my screen? Can someone give me a thumbs up if you can't see a PowerPoint screen? Okay, great. So I'll just walk through it real quick. This is something we talk about a lot to our consultees. I talk to anyone who'll listen. I try to talk about this stuff. When a child's going through SBT and they're doing great and they engage in severe problem behavior, and we have some variance. There might be conditions under which you provide no reinforcement, and we have conditions under which you'll provide full reinforcement, and they could both be right. That's why this is such a dilemma. Isn't that amazing that completely opposite behavioral tactics of full extinction versus provide all their potential reinforcers, those might be plausible given different contextual features. But that all said, If you're looking for the general answer, to me, this is the general answer, and it's not single word. Okay, number one, we always recommend we immediately respond to the behavior. Don't pretend like it didn't happen. The days of pretending kids behaving towards us didn't occur, I hope, are in our rear view. Every kid's behavior, can we just assume that it's communicative to some extent, unless it's automatically reinforced, which really it is. So it has communicative intent. So please acknowledge the speaker. I see that. I hear you. Whether it's a fist or whatever it involves, flipping up the table, hitting you. I get this, or the immediate response. I get it. Things got too hard. Things are too tough right now. Then we provide access to all their reinforcers. We reinforce severe problem behavior, and that is counterintuitive for people, especially when kids at the ass end of treatment. But the whole point is, if you do not reinforce the behavior, it's likely to get worse. And that makes us the restrainers and secluders of people with developmental disabilities, and that's not who we are. That's an artifact of our procedures, and we have to shed that. Someone else has to come along in the white coat and do that job. We're skill builders. Do you know what I mean? So if we don't want that job, we want to get rid of those kind of tactics, we have to respond in a humane way, in a televisable way, provide all the reinforcers, shut it down, and trust that with prompting and differential reinforcement, you will get the skills better the next day, the next week, the next month. It's one little step back, 10 steps forward tomorrow. When you provide all reinforcers, obviously extend that reinforcement interval a little bit longer than usual and be a little bit more tight with your what is HRE. Make sure they're really relaxed before you give it another shot. Make sure you reflect on why then. Monday was beautiful, Tuesday was beautiful, Wednesday was a shit show for that moment. Why? That's what behavior analysis is. Analysis is not just reserved for manipulating conditions. Analysis is being thoughtful. Einstein did a lot of analyses without manipulating Jack. Okay, so can you. Why did that happen? And don't blame the distal variable. Please look close. What's under our nose? What was it in that moment? And then go distal as needed. And then change procedures. And again, like we always say, not at the team meeting, but maybe next trial. And that's going to take us being flexible and teaching Rbts to be flexible and whatnot. But one related thing to this, I think we have to be better at is quitting certain objectives, because if it keeps coming up during that algebra exercise, maybe we question whether algebra is that important to that child at that moment if it's resulting in severe behavior, right? Think about how important algebra is in your life. And I'm not putting down algebra, I actually like algebra. But I think we have to quit sometimes on some objectives when severe problem behavior is in the mix. Okay, so I want to give you another quiz question and I'll come off this point. Now, let's say same kid, Monday beautiful, Tuesday beautiful, they have mild problem behavior. Say they turn to you and say, in context of algebra, I hate algebra and I hate you, right? There were 5 problems into a 15 problem expectation. It's a mild problem behavior. How should you respond to that? Again, the wildness of this question is there are so many right answers, but we have to find some common ground, some universal understanding, and let it branch contextually from there. So this is the attempt at the universal understanding. It seems quite similar to the previous one, but it detours pretty intensely. Immediate empathetic response. Again, I don't care if they give a harumph, a tisk, a bang of the table, a rude comment, a swear, full out self-injury aggression, we acknowledge it. Do not pretend that stuff didn't go down. It did. And if you want it to not go down a second more, I think acknowledgement is where the stoppage lives. But notice it differs here. We don't provide all the reinforcers. We encourage persistence. So let me speak like a behavior analyst right now. This is what we might call partial extinction. Meaning we're going to provide attention immediately, but we're going to withhold escape. We're going to withhold tangibles. We're going to withhold control as reinforcer. Instead, we're going to say, in a very human way, I see you complain about algebra. I understand. Algebra is hard. Let's see if you can handle a few more. Give it a shot. Do you understand? It requires a lot of words. It requires a little more language for some learners. Again, this is depending. I said this, in this case, the kid had language. Okay. Then we want to adjust the criteria for reinforcement. Remember, we never told the child how many problems to do. So if they bang out 2 in a row, hit that with reinforcement. That's truly shaping, yeah? And that's what we're capable of. And everything else is kind of the same as we talked about before. So again, in summary, we are spending a ginormous amount of time teaching people if severe problem behavior happens, no matter where it is in the process, acknowledge it and provide full reinforcement and be safe. And know that your prompting and differential reinforcement will get you to the finish line. Remember, there's a study that's going to come out in JAVA by Robin Landa. It's a complicated study, but basically what it teaches is, as long as most behavior, most of the reinforcement is allocated towards your life skills of communication, toleration, and cooperation, you can get away with some direct reinforcement of severe problem behavior, and severe problem behavior will not necessarily persist. Again, as long as most reinforcers are allocated towards the life skill set and you have effective prompts to promote the next level of that life skill set, you can be okay with reinforcing severe behavior. Do we need more research in this area? Yes. Am I talking out my arse? No. Okay, there's a difference. There's not just one or the other. You know, it's either published, replicated, or you're making stuff up. No, this is based on a lot of experience, and this is based on studies that are like and in the domain. All right, and where does it all come from? Our main mission is not to be effective, folks. If I can just repeat that, our main mission is to be safe. Our main mission is to build rapport with our learners. Our main mission is to make sure when people look at what we're doing that they don't shut us down. And then after that, we'll worry about efficacy. Okay. Sorry if that was a little soapboxy. I'm going to take this, stop sharing. I promise I will not share another slide. Turn this into a lecture. I don't know how to get that smaller.
I don't think anyone would mind if you did that.
Okay, well, that's nice to know, but I'm going to chill on it.
There were questions in the chat if you would be open to sharing those slides.
Oh yeah, sure. I'll send them to one of the lovely moderators, and we'll put them on the website. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet. Let's see. As far as the updates, I'm just going to look at the notes to see if there's anything else. No, I mentioned a couple other things. We're focused on more global measures, so that's something, and measures that matter to people. Dr. Jacobson and Mara van der Zelde are doing an incredible job with just measuring restraints and injuries, even staff call-outs. A nice indicator of whether your group feels comfortable with that client is the extent to which you get call-outs. And these are indirect; they're not perfect measures, but they're very important indicators of whether we're moving in the right direction, and they have great face validity for the people who make decisions about whether we can do these things or not. So that's a big focus for us. Okay, I'll stop.
Thank you. I love when you get on your soapbox, so I appreciate it. I'm sure many people here appreciate it as well. I also just want to follow up with what you said, that many other bodies of research support everything you just said, even if our research doesn't support it right now. So we look at psychology, if we look at child development, there's lots of research there that can support everything you're saying. If people need the research, if they need the research to believe you, it's there.
Well, sometimes people need it to be in Java or articulated in a particular textbook, but we can't wait for that, folks.
No.
Time is short.
Cannot wait for that. Great point. The next question, I'm actually going to condense a couple questions together. And you kind of touched on this earlier, but as you know, we have a lot of people in this group that are implementing this procedure in many different settings and types of clients. What do you want to see more of in the aspect of research and dissemination, and how can we help? Along with, you talked about this earlier, but is there a point at which you think people should be reaching out for further and more formalized consultation?
That's a big one. I'll start with the last one first. I have no idea when people should reach out for formal consultation. You guys know we don't, even as a company, I'll tell you, I do the budget. Our marketing budget is zero. So people come to us through a website, and as long as we think we're a match, we have a couple of questions, do you know what this is? Sometimes people stumble upon websites for the wrong reasons, but and then we go forward. But I really can't tell you the conditions under which it's necessary. Even complex cases, sometimes getting a little bit of advice from a colleague, especially one that's local, and maybe someone who can support you, and that might be just as good. But I will tell you this, the people at FTF, it is their job to support people in this process. So the multiple exemplar training they get just by doing their job and by attending clinical meetings with 25 people doing the same job, most part-time, but 7 or 8 full-time, there's a lot of good capacity there, okay? But at the same time, I have no idea, Hillary, when someone should reach out. I committed to one notion and one notion only. You should not do this alone. That's my one notion. You should always have videotape and share what you're doing, especially when you get a problem, and get a different set of eyes on it. Eyes in a person who there are no contingencies on their failure or success. Do you see what I'm saying? Someone disconnected from the clinical case. It's very important because they can see things a little more clearly. They didn't have the emotional conversation with the mom or the staff, and etc. But other than that, I really have no great understanding there. As far as research, COVID really shut down our research process. My leaving the university partly shut it down maybe as well, but we're getting back to it, we hope. And that concept of partial extinction, I really think needs to be examined. Understand when in the past I used to wield one reinforcer, there was no partial extinction or partial reinforcement because I had one thing. It's on or off, it's binary. But because we are synthesizing multiple reinforcers and whatnot, we can be a little more creative with how we allocate things. And a closer study is by Laura Hanratty. She'll be putting out a study where she shows that, she provides escape for problem behavior, but all the reinforcers for skills. And that's close to it, but it's not exactly what we're saying. And so I think if anyone has the opportunity to do research, to try to evaluate this partial extinction, make it part of your procedure. And just the first thing is just to see if you can get to an effective outcome with that procedure and demonstrate it empirically and publish it. The next step is obviously comparative work, but I'll tell you, it's very hard for me to answer this question, Hillary, because I'm having a really hard time doing comparative research because the comparative condition is one I can't tolerate anymore. So to show something's effective, you usually in our world compare it to something ineffective, and that ineffective thing often makes kids cry or maybe disrupts my relationship with families. And so I have to get way better with control conditions as a researcher than I ever have. And I'm struggling with that, to be honest. So that's why it's hard for me to answer these kind of questions. I'll tell you another one though. This I think could be answered maybe by someone in this group. And there's that myth out there. And I truly believe it's a myth, but we don't have any studies on this. People love to say, well, Billy can't have his preferred items because when he has his preferred items, he gets overly excited. When he gets overly excited, he has severe behavior. And that's not the pathway. My understanding from doing many analyses where we let kids have all their preferred items is kids get their preferred items. They do get terribly excited. As long as you stay the hell out of their way, they do not have severe problem behavior. They have severe problem behavior because we put in EOs because we get scared of the bouncing and the loud and the breaking and possible breaking. And we are putting in EOs. It's just normal stuff. So I think it would be great to figure out a way to just watch kids with their most preferred stuff and stay the hell out of their way and just show time and time again that getting amped does not lead to severe behavior. Evocative events that signal worsening or removal of the thing they love is what leads to severe behavior. And I think that message needs to get out there more empirically and less speculatively as I do now. I think another thing we could all do is teach different ways for kids to provide assent and to withdraw assent and to make it more convincing that that's what they're doing. Do you see what I mean? Like having an open door policy is cool, but just because the door is open doesn't mean that child understands they can walk out. If they've been in ABA for 3 years, they've learned that they can't walk out unless they throw a nutty or, you know what I'm saying, the bell goes off. And so we're making some steps, the enhanced choice model, the open door policies and all that, but they're not fully baked. Okay, they're not fully baked. We need a way to assess quickly and affirm that that is indeed an assent cue, that they're saying, yes, teach me. Yes, throw some EOs in and let's get some skills off the ground. And that they, at the same token, they can withdraw that assent and we can recognize that that's exactly what they're doing. Here's a conundrum. For instance, you have an open door. They leave the room. Now, sometimes in the beginning, we say, oh, follow them, stalk them and see what reinforcers they're collecting and, enhance your therapy, your therapeutic context with those things that they're messing with, or maybe move it to that new location. That's nice. Now, another time someone leaves the room, they could be withdrawing assent and saying, stay the hell away from me. I'm going to go back to my bedroom, or I'm going to go back to my home classroom. And so again, there are these finer points I think we need to get better at, so we can truly say, we teach people to assent to these procedures. We are conducting our therapeutic process under full assent, and people can withdraw it at any time, and they do, and we honor it. And here's some proof of that. So I think that's super exciting for us to maybe get in front of. And I guess the last one is related to another one of your questions down the line here, Hillary. It's that, Mashid and I and a few others consulted in schools. We did SBT, but without shaping. It was instructed. And so someone asked a great question about, instructed performance versus contingency based. And obviously, there's a word on the textbook street that instructed performances are inflexible and they don't adapt as well. And I just don't know we have a lot of evidence. We have few pigeon studies and whatnot, but I don't see that the case. There are certain learners that you can do an open-ended interview with the teachers or caregivers. You can talk to the learner and you can construct a set of contingencies that has the spirit of SBT, instruct it, send that child back to the classroom for a full day, all week intervention with no shaping. I'll just give you a quick example. A kid flips tables, he gets to leave the classroom, sit in the vice principal's office, that sort of thing, or, goes in the hallway and hides under the stairs for hours because they're in a no-touch policy, that sort of thing. And so when you do the open-ended interview, you realize that they're trying to get out of doing the work they can't do very well, that they have a good relationship with so-and-so that's outside the room, that they get a lot of attention from everyone when they're sitting on the yellow bench, et cetera, et cetera. And so you'd have a program like this, and you just teach the child a go-to response. If you want to leave the room, all you got to say is giddy up, or whatever. Come up with some code word, whatever you want to say, let the kids make it up. And then it doesn't go on an intimate, unpredictable schedule. It stays CRF. Trust me, every time you say giddy up, we leave the room, 100%, no shame, doesn't matter what's going on. These are the kind of kids, by the way, that have paras with them, one-to-one kids, they're really, need to have some intense support. Anyways, that's part of the treatment. Then the other part of the treatment is not a tolerance response. The other part is just cooperation. If you cooperate, if you leave the room, by the way, you get attention the whole time. You can take your work, you can not do your work, but there's not much else. You're not getting a lot of control. You're not walking around everywhere. They're not playing basketball. There's not iPads. It's just escape and attention, pretty much. By contrast, if you cooperate with the lesson plan, that 30-minute lesson plan or whatever, you do your group work, little chip comes out, it's black or red. If it's black, it means you get all your reinforcers. You can take a friend, go play basketball with the janitor, that sort of thing. Or if the red one comes out, it just means move on to the next lesson. And then we put in a variable time class-wide reinforcer so kids never want to leave the room. So it's just the bell goes off and there's a 1 minute of hip hop, or there's 2 minutes of penguins falling into ice and things like that. And so we try to motivate kids to not say giddy up because they don't want to leave the room because a bell could go off and something fun for the group might happen. But it's the kind of instructed performance where they know they don't need to torch the classroom or engage in any severe behavior. They can always get out of that socially challenging context. That cooperation pays off with enhanced reinforcement, and that there's some arbitrary reinforcement there just to inspire them to stay put. Is that shaped? No, it's instructed, it's described. There's a little buy-in maybe, and then it's implemented. Let's go, let's do it. That's it. We need more of that because shaping and skill-based treatment right now is painfully slow and really challenging. And I think for some learners, we're generalizing the shaping process to people who have great language, and we don't need to sweat that much. We need to do research on that. So I'll end it on that one.
Thank you so much for that. I am going to mess things up for Hillary. I'm going to change the order of the questions because the next question, this question really it ties into what you're talking about now. So the question is, for a client that has some history of avoiding the therapy space, which is what we're talking about, would you suggest going right into the enhanced choice model or complete VFA SBT without the enhanced choice model first? In what circumstances would you start with the enhanced choice model? Just fits in so nicely.
Yeah, let's see. It's a tough decision when to do the enhanced choice model. There are some amongst us that think every child you should do enhanced choice, and they're not wrong. And if you can pull that off, I'll be impressed. because it's hard to do the enhanced choice model with people who don't have language and trying to do what's essentially a concurrent chains little arrangement. And Dr. Kevin Lazinski has joined us, and there's probably no one on earth that is better at arranging concurrent chains arrangements than he. And he'll be the first to tell you that it takes some time. It takes some experience with the initial link stimuli and the correlation with terminal link stimuli. You have to have X many experiences in those terminal links before you're going to get discriminant performance in the initial links. And even when you get performance in the initial links, sometimes we don't believe it because our prompting leads to man characteristics and models that kids emulate. And so their responding is not a true indication of their preference, but instead an emulation of what they saw. It's complicated, folks. So that's why I worry about doing ECM with all kids. I think you do ECM primarily with learners for whom one instance of severe problem behavior is too much. That's the number one reason we did ECM in our little world. Okay, one instance. Why? Because it's too dangerous. They know how to use weapons. Why? Because they're a high-functioning adolescent with autism, and their parents reported that they are mortified when they melt down, and they never want to go back or be around anyone they've ever melted down with. Do you see what I mean? So those kind of conditions under which we have to protect them from the instance of severe problem behavior, and that's why the enhanced choice is really applicable. But under, you got a 4-year-old child who's, has some emerging SIB and some aggression, but he generally is pretty socially connected, and he engages in severe problem behavior in the middle of the supermarket with a smile, and clearly he's not ruminating on his transgressions and all that, and he's not using shivs and sessions. I don't know if you need to use enhanced choice with a child like that. I think you can just kind of proceed with the open door analysis and be performance based and really read them and give them what they need. And so back to your question, Penny, if the beginning part, if someone is already avoiding a potentially therapeutic place, we're always going to be reflective and ask why, what happened there, was it in the transition? So we're always going to be analytic, even if we're not going to do a functional analysis per se. I'd want to know why. And then I'd probably want to reinitiate with a different person going to a different place, or maybe bringing it to him. So I'm a big fan of not pushing through contexts that are just giving us amazing amounts of trouble. The third room on the left is where they've had a history of EIBI and I don't know, maybe some procedures that we're not psyched about, restraint, seclusion, all that kind of stuff. They peed in the corner, they pooped their pants in that room, all that kind of stuff, right? And then we're going to expect to do that, use that same context with that same person and reestablish this rainbow-like relationship. I just don't see it happening. There's just too much contextual control over that other repertoire and that other language if they're languaging about their behavior. And so I'm definitely a big fan. I've learned a lot from the contextual folks of just saying that's too much for our therapeutic process, too overwhelming. Let's start over, clean slate. It's not trickery, right? It's just stimulus control. And so I like new place, new person, and starting out, spending a lot more time with the joy. So even more so than enhanced choice, Penny, is just spend more time in reinforcement. Make sure they want to come to session. That's our job one, is they want to be there. And setting up simple contingencies. Maybe you don't have to stay in reinforcement too long, but I love it when people stay in that simple FCT for a long time. Listen, man, you are experiencing a contingency, you are controlling it. You have all the reinforcers, but you're more humanized when we're providing them contingently, right? And so I really like when people stick around in FCT and they put in EOs in a variety of creative ways and the kids just shut it down. My way, please. And they're saying it all different ways and they got a big shit-eating grin on. That's what we're talking about. If we can get there, kids will choose to come to session as we extend those chains. Let's spend more time in simple FCT where they're controlling the ebb and flow of the disappointment and reinforcement. That's all I got for that, Penny.
Always a good point to reiterate. Spend more time in SR if you need to. Make sure that relationship is stable. That's why on our logo we have those roots of the tree, because that is the most important part of this treatment, in my opinion. You can't go far if you don't have a good relationship to build upon. So thanks for reiterating that. I'm going to go back a little bit. We provided you with the questions ahead of time. So just so you know, I'm going backwards from where we jumped forwards.
No worries.
We have a couple of questions that came in about the SR condition. So again, this is a nice bridge. The first one is about what are your recommendations if the SR condition is prohibitive or if it's not convenient? I think some of the main players in this are like electronics are sometimes not involved in SR or water play or being on an outing or things like that.
Yeah.
So if those are the case, we'd love some wisdom.
Well, I'll do my best. I want to go back. There's a little thing in the chat by Greg Govan. And it's an article by Belial and one of Mark Dixon's colleagues there. And I take a look at it. Okay, there's some points in it that are highly consistent with the conversation we just had. And Stacy asked this question about staying in reinforcement and taking data for funders. And Stacy, I don't know if you were with us earlier, but that's what I was talking about earlier when we have to get better at coming up with objectives for reinforcement that funders can recognize because they're objectives and not just considering reinforcement the dead space of SVT. So I hope that helps. But to the question you asked, Hillary, that's terrible. I think I forgot it. Just give me 4 words. I'll
No,
name
that's
that question
okay.
in 4 notes.
SR is prohibitive
yeah.
or yeah, okay.
Yeah. So here's the thing, both, yes, sometimes synthesized reinforcement is, let's just call it what it is, a massive draining pain in the ass. Yes, you got a 80-pound 4-year-old who just wants to ride your back the whole time while you blow bubbles and sing, I don't know, Thomas the Train. I don't even know if Thomas sings. I don't think he does. He's pretty stale. But anyways, you know what I'm saying. And it's hard, and it's a lot of hard work, and it's sweaty, and it is all that. And so I don't know what to say to that other than this. Let's hire some bigger people. Let's hire athletes. You know, you got all those Olympians that just came back from Tokyo. Like, why are they all working at Home Depot? They should be working with us. Let's get big athletic boys and girls to swing kids around. Let's never say, sorry, I know you love physical play, but I'm weak. So let's do arts and crafts. Now, you're not saying that, this person, you're not saying that. I'm being, goofy, but you see my point? We got to find, if that's what the child wants, we do have to, first and foremost, just try to bring it. Okay, and they're right. There are a lot of small non-Olympians in this panel that can bring it. So I'm sorry, it's not a satisfying answer, but I really want you, we got Chauncey there. He looks like he can throw kids around. I'm not great with this question because I just say, listen, if that's what the kid wants, let's try to get it. I will come up with a better answer in a minute. But I just like to push people towards that. If they want that iPad and they want to play the same mundane game for the 100th time, it's okay. What does that teach you? It teaches you your cab branch should not be matching colors. Your cab branch should be leisure skills. It doesn't mean the kid's wrong. We kind of got to get over this notion. The kid is right. If that's what they want to do, they're right. So we got to give them the opportunity to do it. But it doesn't mean that's how it should be forever. Let's move through SPT quickly and get them that table high expectation and teach them other ways to find joy in the world. You know what I mean? And let's get more leisure skill building there. So that's the pie in the sky answer. Here's a more practical answer. If a child is just draining, with weird water play, and you get water coming through the ceiling into people below you. I don't know, just like that was an actual thing that happened. And so try to modify the environment. We got a pool with higher walls, that sort of thing. I like people use lately in our consultees are coming up with this. They use choice boards, depends on language level and all this. So you figure out what the synthesized reinforcement context is. Then you figure out how they're allocating their time. Then you will discover whether or not it's untenable. If it's untenable, put the choice board in. And basically what it is what the options change. Okay, just every now and then I would have a tone go off, an arbitrary event. Try not to make it too socially mediated, like you're the boss of that environment. So I want you to divorce it from you a little bit. Boop, 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 boop. Oh, okay, guess we should make a choice now. And every time they go over that choice board, it looks a little different. Sometimes water play's not there. Sometimes iPad's not there. Is it risky? Yes, completely. Is it something I do at day one? Certainly not. I would do it after you found that this is untenable because it's a little bit dangerous, a little bit breaky, a little bit too sweaty. And then you modulate what's in the synthesized reinforcement through the choice board. I've seen people do it more chancy. Actually, one of Floriana Caniello's colleagues did this a little bit with feeding. It's the same spirit. Basically, just put the pictures of the reinforcing activities in a coffee can, and you control what goes in the coffee can. You let them put their hand in the coffee can, whatever they pick out, that's the activity for a bit. Once the tone goes off, they get to go make another choice, but you control what goes in the coffee can. This is all stuff you can do before you start popping NEOs. This is all stuff you can do after you're in SBT and you realize reinforcement again has become untenable. And so you have to modify it a little bit. You're gonna, have to remove some of them. So I personally like it when the child gets to choose and it's a little random. That's, to me, is the fun part. And you're behind the scenes kind of manipulating. However, last point, I caution you against doing that with language able savvy kids. Do not mess. Do not be the behind the scenes guy under those conditions. That's more for like younger kids that nonverbal don't have, and they just want to ride piggybacks all day. That's when you might want to do that random stuff in a coffee can. Okay, hope that helps.
It does. Thank you so much. The next question is sort of a follow-up on this. Generally, when we create HRE, we make it more awesome, right? So now we're talking about the COVID times compared to everything outside. So if your synthesized reinforcement really is, we are going outside with mom and dad and we're going to activities and we eat awesome food. If that is your thing, right? We're talking about Disneyland, and it really is, it's a thing. And then you have the COVID times where mom is still there, but she's in the kitchen. Dad is there, but he's behind a Zoom. So then we try to create those conditions in the house, but it's a more sucky version of the synthesized reinforcer. So my question is, it's the real thing, right? It does happen. So do you have any tips for all of us sucking Disneyland down?
Well, I really don't have great tips for that, Penny. Yes, all our reinforcement is a little more sucky these last few months, I would say. I think that's probably a truism, and that's a problem. And so I hope that changes soon. But that said, I think that the main thing is if you keep that open door policy and you allow, wherever you're doing this therapy, it sounds like in the home, you allow that child to wander and find if they want to play with the kitchen utensils and the pots and pans on the floor at that moment in time, that is the reinforcer that we go with that. So I think that's what we generally hang our hat on, is let the kid explore during reinforcement, let them get into it with new things. So that can help when there are things absent from the environment that maybe were historically there. The mom and dad part is very tricky for me. That's the main benefit of having a child go to school in a clinic. You don't have them pining to be with their mom when they're supposed to be working and their dad when they're supposed to be cooking, etc. That is the truest challenge I see when I'm consulting with anyone in the home, is the interaction between mom and dad. And the therapist is trying to do SBT and they just boogie right out of the EO and go talk to mom. It's challenging. So what can we do there? It's very hard because we don't want to do a lot of extinction. We don't want mom managing withholding herself. But I will say this, when you start the process, you have an opportunity to teach the learner a little bit about what's available and not available. So I do ask that when you start the process, don't make people part of the synthesized reinforcement, because you can't depend on their availability unless you have a parent that is well-heeled, doesn't work, need not clean or cook, and they can be 100% available through the therapeutic process. Don't make them part of the synthesized reinforcement. Teach them on day one. When you show up, it's you, the client, and stuff, and move, freedom of movement, etc. Don't have the parents in there. Now, easier said than done. If you're working with a young client and they want to go get their mommy, they're going to go get their mommy. But what I might recommend is you make it so that you don't synthesize it with the other reinforcers. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's a choice. It's like enhanced choice. Think about it this way. You can go sit with your mommy. You can go sit on your mommy's lap. You go harass your mommy. You can do that anytime you want. Or you can play the SBT game with me. And they're two different things. No, you can't take all my reinforcers, our content. This is our stuff. No, we don't want you to bring it over there. So there's a little no. It's a little premature knowing. But again, I think you can get stimulus control over that. And that's what you have to do at the front end so it doesn't bite you in the later in the process. Maybe there's more to it, but I think I hope that's sufficient. Okay.
This is a really common question we get, so appreciate anything you have to shed on it. I'd say it's one of the more common questions we have on the page. So yeah, and the chat is awesome. There's some really cool things going on in the chat. Kaylin just said boundaries on the front end are so essential. Get that clear stimulus control for sure. So here's another question. I'm gonna move on from these SR. We had a couple more SR questions, but in the essence of time, I'm gonna move on from those. And I think you gave us a lot of great answers. So a question here. Hello, can you clarify what's meant by remain at each teaching step until all expected behaviors are occurring independently? Should we continue moving through the cabs if we are prompting, like motioning a child to stand up, and we're seeing very low levels of R2 behaviors? I know when I'm learning new skills, I often engage in R2 behaviors because learning new skills can be frustrating and difficult. Would we be expected to remain at that teaching step if we see those lower level R2s during, let's say, a CAP 5? And you talked about this a little bit, but more specifically, do you continue moving on when you're continuing to see those low level problem behaviors at a certain level in this process?
Right on. This is a great question. It's a complicated area. I do want to say, if you have good answers to some of these questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I know people are on this panel that are like, man, that answer was a C- at best. I was sitting on a B+. So if you have a B+ or an A-, feel free to put it in the chat. I trust that that's happening right now. But that said, let's get to this one. The deal is this, folks, with the R2s. If that R2 is a demonstrated, or your gut feeling is that it's clearly a member of the response class, and were you not to respond with some reinforcement to it, that it's likely to lead to escalation, then I want you to stay at that step. And I want you to work on getting that skill more independent in the absence of that problem behavior. Okay, and that's what I probably was thinking about when I said that in that class. Okay, try to get the expected behavior independent with no R1s or R2s, and then move on to the next step, right? And that makes sense. Now that makes sense when it's truly an R2 that's not a demonstrated member of the response class, because sometimes we never see SIB and aggression even when we're treating it, right? But your gut is telling you, you know enough to know that behavior of hurling an insult at you, if you don't kind of provide some reinforcement, let that kid, try to encourage persistence. He doesn't, then say, you know what, let's go back to your way. Let's reset. If you don't do that, he's going to escalate. Then yes, I hold true to what the spirit of what I said there. Stay at that step. Maybe break down the skill a little bit. Task analyze it. Break down the EO, expose them to smaller units or bits or strengths of it, and then build them back up. However, here's where it gets tricky. And I think this is what this person's thinking of with their own personalization of it. Sometimes I like to complain when I'm learning something new. Sometimes we clump things as R2s that really aren't R2s, folks. Let's call them R4s, because we already took R3 for something else. If you don't know then don't worry about it. But call them R4s, okay? R4s are complaint behaviors. R4s are kids who, when you say, great job after they finish their chain of behavior, they're like, great job. You know what I mean? They mimic you, they mock you. They're kind of mad at you for even putting them through their paces. They did it, they cooperated, but they're still chewing on a little bit. They're complaining a little bit. They're not really members of the response class. They're not functioning on the environment the same way as aggression and SIB and property destruction was. Some kids are just mouthy. Some kids have, they just talk it out. They're just talking it out. So what I'd like to recommend, when kids do that, don't let that constrain you to move on to the next step. We take that, okay? We take a little lip is what I'm saying. Don't mistake that for an R2, a member of response class that could lead to severe behavior. Okay, just got to think about it, and how you know the answer to that is if you don't acknowledge, that thing, and it leads to aggression. It's a member of the response class. If you don't acknowledge that thing and they just keep on complaining at you, it's probably an R4. Okay, so what I'm saying is that they're just kind of complaining. Don't let that stop you from proceeding in the process. But it doesn't mean let them whine, let them talk through, let them be rude, condescending, what have you. It doesn't mean that. It means use differential reinforcement again, in a different way. Let this process fold back on itself. Teach them another way to end reinforcement. Teach them how to receive praise. Consider not praising them in an inauthentic way too. Okay, a lot of kids are mouthing off to us because they think we're treating them like children and they think they're adolescents. A lot of kids are mouthing off to us because we're enthusiastic when they know they didn't do anything impressive. So we need to probably modulate a little bit of what we're doing, but there are kids that are just a little mouthy. And so we teach them explicitly what to do. We teach them to say, thank you, things like that. We teach them to say, I nailed it, didn't I? They just need some words. They have to get that last word in. So give them some words. Give them some words that are going to work and make them appreciated in other contexts and whatnot. Again, this is complicated. So if you don't feel like you fully understand this, it's because I don't either. I'm not going to do a functional analysis of that behavior to figure out what it is. I'm going to make some good guesses. How risky is it to treat it as a complaining behavior? And I'm not saying complaining behavior has some automatic reinforcement to it, right? Kids just like to hear themselves talk. They think they're champions of the moment as long as they get the last word in. Okay, so there's that, and there's a little social to it. They're looking for you to respond a little bit. Don't be afraid to respond. If they finish it up and you say, okay, that was great work, and they said, that was great work, it's okay to talk about that. Wow, that's a little snarky. You know what I mean? Like, engage them. If you don't engage them, again, it's kind of like that other story. It could lead to escalation. You could put in a different EO. Ignoring humans talking to you is a great way to piss them off. Can we just agree on that? Like, just try and emphasize with anybody, go to a restaurant, do it with your significant other, have them say something to you with strong communicative intent and pretend like they didn't speak. Just see how it plays out. It's never good. So no matter what, acknowledge it, respond, and then figure out whether you want it to hold you up from shaping. You need to task analyze, or you simply need to move on and teach them a way to mouth off better. Okay, great.
Thank you so much for that. You're losing a little bit of audience to Chauncey's baby, but I mean, it is a very cute baby. Yeah.
I was losing my own thought to Chauncey's baby. It's true. I was hoping he would also do shoulder presses with her, like I know he does in our absence, but that's up to you, Dad.
Okay. Our next question is, what are your thoughts on contingency-based learning versus teaching rule-governed behavior for older, highly verbal learners?
Yeah, Penny, I tried to hit that earlier. I missed the mark. But the thing is, folks, if you have a high language learner, I don't think it's a terrible thing to, if they will talk to you, if they're not shut down completely, but they'll talk to you. I think it would be important to do the interview with them a little bit and kind of talk through that instructional model I mentioned earlier, where you give them a go-to response, tell them you could to trust you, that'll always be reinforced, that CRF for the go-to response, and then talk about, if you can hang on in class and engage in and cooperate with the learning experience, there's a chance you'll get to go boogie with the buddy and, shoot hoops. Again, that's a classic example, but it's personalized, obviously. And then say, hey, what are the fun things you guys do as a class that you hate missing? And what would you love if the teacher did in the classroom? We help them, have them inspire some of the things we do in the VT, variable time schedule. So I don't know if the question asker is asking for something more deliberate. I will tell you this. I don't believe anymore that contingency-shaped behavior is wholly better than instructed behavior. I know we learned that in behavior analysis 101, but there's just not good enough evidence for that. And in fact, I'll direct you to a study that I love. Oh, if Kevin Lazinski's on, maybe he could, I can't remember, this is terrible. Kevin, he was he directed the CTE program at KU. Dan Bernstein. Dan Bernstein was a behavior analyst. He used to be the editor of the Behavior Analyst a long time ago. He has a study comparing contingency-shaped behavior picked up through a model and behavior instructed. And what he shows is that instructed behavior, you get faster acquisition than you do through the model or you do through contingency shaped. Let me say that again. Contingency shaped behavior, you have slower acquisition. You get faster acquisition when the model is provided or through instruction. But then he ran the study further. He had an adaptation phase where he changed the stimulus relations. And what he showed there was the model, the behavior picked up via model, and the behavior picked up via instructions were a little inflexible at first, but then the learners eventually adapted. By contrast, the folks who learned through contingencies adapted very quick. When all was said and done, when you looked at how long it took the learners to get through the trials, collectively between acquisition and adaptation, it was the same for all strategies. The point is, you can teach via models, you can teach via instructions, you can teach via continuous statement. There's advantages and disadvantages. Advantage at the front end with acquisition for a couple, there's advantage at the ass end when it's about generalization or adaptation or problem solving. So I personally don't hang my hat on having a preference for one. I take what my learner can do and I will try to do all of them, right? We will model these skills. We will use contingencies and we'll practice. Maybe it'll be role play, maybe it'll be authentic, and we'll use instructions when we can. The only thing I won't do, and again, maybe the question asker is getting at this, I don't like being really weird with if-then statements, thinking that's going to facilitate control by the contingency. Because if I'm doing that with someone with language, chances are they also have diagnoses like ODD and things of that nature, and saying it gets in the way of the therapeutic process. So there's that to consider too. But this is such a big question. I may be floating all on the outside of what you want me to do, but those are my responses.
All very helpful. Thank you so much.
Great.
Okay, moving on. This is a question from Dr. Megan Miller. She asked me to say that it's from her. So this is her question. She said, based on your history working in systems that don't seem to value or recognize the humanity of the clients being served and seem more focused on data points and science rather than the agency of the human in front of them, and shifting from that culture to a more humane and joyful and person-centered approach is difficult. What tips do you have for people working in that data and science sector who want to shift these cultures more into the humanity side of this equation? And I picked, we had a lot of buy-in questions, Dr. Hanley, and I picked this one because I've heard your buy-in answers a lot, but I thought this was a really interesting viewpoint of buy-in from the systematic view that I think you have more of an experience level in than most. So I'm hoping you can shed some light, like even if I'm thinking like organizationally or within larger systems, if you're trying to shift culture. Any words?
It's wicked hard. That's my word. It's wicked hard. So how about this? How about first we give up on the really old guys? Just give up. That's what I've done. Whatever. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen. So I give up. That's number one. Number two, focus on young people related to number one. They don't have as much baggage. They're not as committed. Their legacy isn't related on. They don't have a grant or 10 theses they're about to publish using the old way. So they don't have all that clutter in the way of thinking clearly and doing what's right. So there's that. Third, I don't let anyone take the science word away from us. So I understand what Meg's doing, and it's hard to come up with labels, and I'm not saying Meg didn't say it the right way, she did. But I want to be very clear. What we do is as scientific as what anyone else does, and I will not lose that. But it's the fact that I won't parcel things out or act inhuman and cold and overly tentative and etc. And so I think we have to be careful of that mindset, but I know what she's saying. I get it. Listen, the thing is, folks, if we don't change, our field is screwed. I truly believe that. Okay, if we don't get rid of the ugliness, our field is screwed. We're not going to have jobs. You understand, it wasn't that long ago that there weren't jobs like this. You couldn't call yourself a behavior analyst. You had to go in as a, other clothing. So this is new, and this could be temporary. And to me, the route to surviving is to get rid of everything ugly that we do in the name of practice. And we never let the word science allow us to do anything ugly. And when we have to do ugly things because we just in the moment don't know a better alternative, we at least have to reflect on it that night and go to work the next day trying to do it better, like Meg Miller has coined. Okay, so I guess that's all I can say. And then I guess I think we have to model being very effective. I do believe some people's minds change when and only when they see a client that they thought it's just the way it is. Those brain juices are the way they are. And even the science didn't work. If you can work with one of those clients and you get them to a meaningful finish line that sciencey person wasn't able to, then I think you're making some headway. So again, I don't think you can do it with talk, okay? And I'm fairly certain I can't do it with research publications. I've learned that. I think and I don't care about them, to be honest. I don't wake up in the morning thinking about how I'm going to convince them. Now, the person asking the question, maybe not Megan, but other people saying, yeah, but I work with these people. And we're trying to create the shift, but how do we get them on board? So I'll take that separately, but I'm just saying there are people in the field who aren't into it. I don't wake up thinking about them. I wake up thinking about our field. I am loyal to our field, and I'm trying to do what's best to make sure we have a long shelf life. And to me, the root is to get rid of everything ugly. Imagine you videotape everything, and if you'd be embarrassed for that to be on TV, stop doing that shit. That's it. You know what I mean? And the other point I like to convey to people is, are you procedures over values, or are you values over procedures? That's the bottom line. You know what I mean? So when people say, well, there's 17 studies showing you could use extinction in that feeding situation. Yeah, there are. There's actually more than 17, but okay, I get your point. I could follow their mouth around with the spoon. You're right. And it likely would work. You're right. But I will never do that because it's ugly. There you have it. That's called values over procedures. I know it's an evidence-based procedure, but that's the point. You're a procedure over value person if you're doing that. I'm a value over procedure person. One of my values being televisability. That's the whole point. So to me, it's not even a discussion. I don't have these discussions because they stop there, and we just move on. Your values over procedures. Our values are safety, televisability, and rapport. And if it ruins any of those three, we're not going to do it. I don't care how many journal articles or how many gray-haired people have espoused its value. And it's going to force us to just do things differently. And what else? And what about people in your organization? The way to convince people in your organization is to be effective. I do believe that. To be effective with families, to be effective with those learners, not to be fast. It may take you a while. Be patient with yourself. Do it right, do it televisable, and videotape it and share those videos internally. And I think Dr. J and Mara and John and these folks at UCP, I think they've gotten a lot of buy-in because they've captured a lot of their success. And internally, that's been very powerful. And so Tina Gunn at Surrey, same thing. She's really marshaled a group to capture some nice moments, and that's how she's bringing people on board that aren't even behavior analysts, right? They're more in the special education lane. So, and last thing I'd say is be patient. Be patient with people who think what you're doing is malarkey. Don't think they're a-holes or dumb or anything like that. They're as well-intentioned as you and I. Their heart is as big. You know what I mean? It's not like we're some kind of hippie softies, a little more emotional, more empathetic. You know, it's not that at all. It's that we've tasted success and been differentially reinforced by these things. Other people have some reinforced contingencies against doing these things. Maybe there's some evil mofos in our field, that maybe there's that too, I don't know. But I believe when someone young in your organization thinks this is malarkey, you really got to be patient with them, and you got to show them the superior efficacy of this and show them the beauty of this on a daily basis. And it really starts with the RBTs. That's why it's so important. I think we make this RBT support system, because that's where the BCBAs come from, right? RBTs turn into BCBAs, so we got to get them young. And second, man, there's nothing like being a BCBA working with a bunch of RBTs that want to go to work because they feel safe, because they have fun at work, because their clients are smiling and they are too. So it's very reinforcing for BCBAs who do these sort of things and doing well to work with those RBTs. That's what people have taught me. And so, yeah, let's just say, if you want to change, you want to get the cultural shift, treat your RBTs like they're going to be BCBADs, get them training, make sure they know how to bring the joy, make sure they know how to turn problem behavior off before it escalates, and videotape that stuff. And then videotape your successes with your complex SBT cases. That's how you make the shift happen, as Dr. J would say. Dr. J, if you don't mind, would you add something to this?
I think you're spot on. You know, for me, certainly the videos have been our #1 tool to make this work. You have to show what's possible, particularly with some of your more challenging learners, students, adults. That's what's been great with our the videos that we've been able to share out throughout our agency. And we just it just happened organically. We're, you know, all the work that we did with you, you required a lot of videos, and we were like, oh, holy shit, this looks great. And then we were like, let's just go start showing people. And they were amazed by it. And we were able to do things that we hadn't previously been able to do. So certainly something that's great. And you guys know, I always talk about John Cotter and work that you can, I mean, particularly for this field, looking outside the field, looking in the business industry, looking at the cultural change literature. And there's a lot of stuff that you can gain from that, but it's right in line with that. It's marketing, it's selling, you know, but sell the product that you like and that you're proud of and that is consistent with your values. And I think that's what we've been doing. And a lot of it, you know, the work that we've done with Greg here has just allowed us to move that forward in a way that's just been amazing.
Cool.
Was that enough?
That was always right on, Dr. J. There's some nice notes there by in the comments too, if you want. I agree with you, Megan, that, you know, a lot of people say, well, I do this because it's more evidence-based and whatnot, but there's no evidence for using that particular form of extinction in that particular context. Please know our literature base is so limited with such a young applied science. You have to make massive extrapolations from any published study. And so respect the fact that when you're filling in a blank and doing something a little different, even when you're moving it out from research, it's always an extrapolation, you know what I mean? Because our literature base is so constrained and small, subject pool is small.
Yeah, you can't forget that file drawer effect.
And there's that too, right? For every study maybe that particular ugly procedure worked, there's a whole bunch more that it doesn't work, right? And, you know, you look at Dr. Jessel's work, he's opening up his file cabinet and he's showing things work time and time again. But it requires patience, and it requires, you know, working with funders differently and dealing with administrators who say, why is that kid in a beanbag chair looking at a video? Requires all that political and logistical work. And so I've been saying recently to people, to be effective at this, you not only have to know the process, but you've got to be a little bit of a weirdo. You have to be an advocate. You have to be a politician. You have to be, I don't know if this is a word, logistician, like you have to do logistics. And so there's a lot more to it than just prompting and differential reinforcement. I wish it was that easy.
You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's for sure. Ed dropped a cool resource in the chat. We have an amazing webinar called Create the Wave and Write It with Eric and Co and Ed. If you're looking to get some resources and learn about getting buy-in, that's a good one to watch. I'm going to move on to our last question because we're almost at time. So I'm going to preempt this with a huge thank you for doing this for us. This was awesome. Every time I have the opportunity to chat with you or listen to something you're saying, I learn something, and I value that so much. And I know our group does too. So appreciate that deeply. Our last question is a la Matt Sikoria. When you are thinking about someone starting this process out in their first go, maybe they've taken the 10-hour course, maybe they haven't, and they're going to give this a shot. What's your advice for the newly minted PFA'er?
My advice, my main advice, don't do this alone in your garage. That's number one. Make sure you do it as part of a community like this one. As good as have someone local or in your company that you can learn together. I really think, I almost wish we were draconian in our contingencies with that course, and it would go something like this. You can't take it alone. You have to have a buddy. You know what I mean? I almost wish we do that, because I think you need someone to talk to and talk through this and practice the language on, and then when you go apply it, to talk to someone. So I really think, Matt, that's the best advice, is try not to struggle alone. Just because you took a very long course, and sorry for that, but just because you took a very long course doesn't mean you're going to have all the answers in application. Okay, you're going to learn by doing, and it's a lot less painful if you can engage in reflective practice where you're not both speaker and listener all the time. Do you dig what I'm saying? Sometimes you need to be speaker, let someone else be listener, and vice versa. You need a buddy. So that's my, I guess, number one bit of advice. The number two advice is, we used to give very bad advice and we would say, oh, pick the client who has the most severe, oh my God, Ed, your daughter is so cute. Pick the client who has the most severe behavior, who everyone knows is like, really challenging, or the funders, he's the most expensive kid in the district, blah, 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 and do that. Don't do that. I want you to select a client to do this process, and that when you take the course, you're thinking of that client or that child, because like, that's so him. He would benefit tremendously from that, even if he's not flying under the radar. The most important thing when you start this process is that it's reinforcing to you to do. Okay. And if you pick the most complex kid in Oklahoma, it's not going to be. It's going to be a slog. It's going to be really hard. And if you persist and do it again, it's going to be impressive. So pick a client that has, real problems that you can help them with, but someone for whom you think you can get them to the finish line. So you're reinforced for doing this. And then you build up a little video library to show people the process, and you can start creating the shift with all that. But I think that was another bit of advice we used to get wrong. Oh, the harder, pick the most complex cases, the most challenging kids. But I think you want to graduate to that. I don't think you want to start there for very obvious reasons that weren't obvious to me in the past. I do, if I could, I know we're tight on time, Hillary. There's some things in the chat that made me think of it. I'd like to just make some connections here.
Absolutely.
People like to say, hey, isn't this process just like what so-and-so is saying, and this and that? I want to say, I don't even know, you don't even need to tell me who. The answer is probably yes, because nature fractures the same for people coming from different perspectives, okay? This stuff just works. And so there are many other people talking the same content, but they just arrived at it through a different place. So their language system might be different and all that, but let's just respect that. So who are some people? I'm having an issue with names lately, but is it Ross Green? Is that correct? Okay. And, he kind of puts behavior analysis or behavior modification as a strong man in some of his books and kind of knocks it down, and he pisses off a bunch of behavioral type people by doing so. But please understand, what he's talking about in the book is highly consistent with what we're talking about. Highly consistent. Okay. Who's the gentleman that passed away a while back? He wrote an 82-page paper, the behavior analyst. God, what's his name? On contextual. Oh God, someone give me the name in the chat. Hey, thank you, Andrew Miller. You are fast, and I gave you so little clues. Israel Gold Diamond, thank you. Israel Gold Diamond's work on the constructivist approach there. I never really learned that in graduate school. I read it way later, and then I was like, interesting. That was a long article. And then I read it more recently, and to me, the consistency between the values and a lot of the procedures between what we're talking about and what he was talking about a long time ago are amazing. Stuff in the ACT world, in the ACT world, then there's a lot of consistency. So just respect the fact that you're not alone. That's what I take from these things. We're not alone. There are a lot of people chirping the same things. And these value-based approaches have been around a long time. Person-centered planning, positive behavioral support, but they got kicked away, right? People had to go start their own journals and get their own grants. And we're not getting kicked away because I saw how that works. Whatnot. And I think we're bringing something different to the table. We have as much science as anybody else can claim in their applied processes, but we have the values first parts too. And so I think that's why we can do some good things in the world. So again, know that we're part of a collective, and let's keep reading and seeing those similarities and learning from other people approaching things in different ways. And then the last thing I guess I wanted to share about this group is continue, no matter what you read, just continue to be kind in this group. I see kindness in this group, and that's the part I like about this group the best. Every single ABA or autism or other professional group I belong to in social media, half the time I read something, I find it difficult. And I never see that in this group because there's a citizenship that is above the pale. And I know a lot of it's because of the modeling. I know a lot of it's because of the moderators, but I just ask that you keep just supporting each other because it's really a pretty amazing thing that I see go on here. And that's the linchpin of this group. It's not PFA and SBT. It's the kindness and generosity people show towards each other that to me is more unique than the procedures that we're gathered to talk about.
I'm going to get emotional. We put so much love into this group, so it's so good to see it reflected back at us. So thank you for acknowledging that. I mean, I agree. It's not just us. It's not us working behind the scenes. It's every member of this group. We are all here and we're putting our values first. And I think that's why the group is what it is. So thank you so much. We are like perfectly timed for 90 minutes. I'm incredibly impressed. So good job to all of us, especially to you, Dr. Hanley, for keeping us on time. Yeah, we're going to end this here. I am grateful for this community. Congratulations on 10K to everyone and really appreciate today. And I'm excited to put this out. Well, this is recorded, so we'll be getting it up pretty quickly here. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody. And especially
you.
Dr. Hanley for joining us.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, guys. Thank everyone for being a part of this. Good luck, Shane Noel, with your 10K.
Thank you.
I look forward to meeting you guys face to face someday. That'll happen.
Family
All right.
vacation, upstate, cerebral palsy.
All right, be good.
All right, thank you. Bye.